Yelima, Cedric, and Ronen, Irene. Let us imagine. Oops. The festively lit up theatre des Westens is crowded with the distinguished elite of Berlin's society, wealthy bourgeoisie, ardent intellectuals, bohemians and art lovers. The year is 1911, perhaps 1912, and the occasion, a ballet performance of the world-renowned Ballet Russe company under the direction of Sergei Diaghilev, starring the legendary Václav Nijinsky. Now let us imagine Herr Dr. and Frau Dr. Buber in the audience. Whoops. Where did they disappear? Yeah. Watching the ballet. Did they indeed? Unfortunately, I cannot tell you for sure. However, in view of ample records, we know that the event was sensational, hitting high waves in Berlin's cultural scene and leaving an unforgettable impression on its beholders. Nijinsky, the undisputed god of dance, almost an incarnation of Nietzsche's powerful imagery, whose legendary reputation preceded him throughout Europe, was at the peak of his career. His dancing was so different, so unique, that it kindled the imagination of artists and inspired audiences worldwide. On Wednesday, the 11th of December 1912, Hugo von Hofmannsthal described Nijinsky's performance in the Berliner Tageblatt as utterly astounding. This, and I quote, mimetic endeavor epitomizes the privilege of the new, the significant in art, which is to be alienated. Nijinsky's so-called mimetic endeavor deeply impressed Georg Kolbe's numerous sketches of the dancer, and his statue, based on his role as Der Geist der Rose, which he designed in 1912 for the Heine monument in Frankfurt am Main, was only one of various depictions modeled on this outstanding dancer. We shall return to Nijinsky's Geist, but at this point let us just take note of the phenomenal prosperity of dance in turn-of-the-century Germany. All those who could danced, and those who couldn't wrote about dance. Nietzsche, Rilke, Hofmannsthal, Ibsen, Lasker Schüler, even Agnon wrote a story titled Teutentanz, to name just a few. But what was dance to Buber, and if at all, was Buber to dancers or to dance? And why is it still relevant today? I do apologize for not being able to tackle within our time limit the important indirect influence of these texts in lending agency to Zionist women dance pioneers. I will do so in my article. However, as a ballet teacher and dance theorist, standing here in awe of you lot, Buber scholars, I invite you to participate in my own reading of Buber's dance musings. At first glance, there seems to be very few mentions of dance in the vast corpus of Buber's writings. However, on closer inspection, there are several interesting references to the topos of dance throughout his lifetime. I apologize again for leaving out in today's lecture the whole issue of Hasidic dance, which has been addressed previously. However, I hope to show that there is a consistent movement, let us say between Tanz and Distanz, in Buber's use of the trope, perhaps along the three stages that Sylvia outlined this morning. beginning with his useful publications in which dance is synonymous with nature, freedom, and joy, continuing with a broader view of dance as a form of art, a human form of art, and concluding with his later work in which dance came up again in 1951. Buber's earliest dance reference goes back to his 1903 cycle of poems dedicated to the Talmudic Tana Elisha ben Abuya called Acher. The epithet Acher, meaning other or different, indicates ben Abuya's heresy, which intrigued Buber, who was himself grappling with the idea of otherness in face of the big changes in the Jewish world. In one of the cycle's poems, entitled Two Dances, he questions the figure of otherness by juxtaposing two different ways of dancing. It is no mere incident that the poem is dedicated to a Grecian woman, einer Hellenin zugeeignet. Perhaps a tribute to his newly wed wife Paula, who completed her conversion to Judaism only some years later and whom he presumably met during a dance, or to the groundbreaking performance of Isadora Duncan in front of the Acropolis in that same year. However, since the question of apostasy is framed by the topos of dance, it seems that dance is taken here as a marker of otherness, not only that of acher, or that of modernity, but also an allegorical expression of Jewish otherness, echoing the ancient conflict of Jerusalem versus Athens. And I quote from Friedman's translation. Acher and his students stand by a young field. Evening has arrived in silent splendor and everyone feels blessed. One of the disciples takes the courage to speak to the master. See, isn't it beautiful here? Do not earth and air intermingle in a glow? Does life not flow proudly and richly, and in yearning freedom in every stem, in every bird? And we who feel it are supposed to be ugly? We should not blossom in passionate beauty. The nation who sees all this is not supposed to exist. See here, look closer. Are you sure there is nothing here? No song, no deed, no dream, nothing at all? In Buber's poetic imagination, the student's complaint evokes the memory of two dances in Ben Abuya's mind. A Greek couple dance conjuring up the imagery of beauty, freedom, and graceful harmony with the lovely splendor of nature, contrasted by the image of a fervent circle dance performed at Simchat Torah's Eve by Jewish men with sparkling eyes. Theirs is not a union of erotic love, but one of comradeship, of common yearning and destiny. I quote, "Not two and two they dance in a group, and those who move in one circle, they are brothers for life and of like mind." And further on, they love each other with a great love, strong as death and eternal, and each one adds the fire of his own yearning to that of his friend, for they yearn and desire to break down all barriers and to be in eternity like God. Most touching I find the ending of the poem, when Acher claims, "Quiet, the dance is dead." But no, it lives in us. Look into our eyes, it lives in our souls. It merely waits. Look. So the dance is not yet dead. On the contrary, now is the time to dance, as Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasov uttered when he was about to die. After all, freedom of the heart, I quote, which dance exemplifies, may open up a different way to salvation, notably the figure of turn or return, umkehr, is an inherent element of any dance vocabulary, an element combining the dual meaning of sense as significance and sense as direction, kivun and kavanah, carrying within it an innate seed of an intentional change of path. But what kind of dance is needed? What sort of change? Is it the supportive community in which Buber and Landauer took great interest at the time, figured by the arduous circle dance and kindled by the sacred fire of faith, or the harmonious, joyful dance of two? While in Buber's earlier writings, dance appears to be mainly an abstract metaphor for an elemental, vital mode of being and thinking, his 1914 essay, Brother Body, Bruder Leib, seems to erupt from a private memory as well as a personal erlebnis. He addresses the dancer as his next of kin, a blood brother. He writes, "The dancer is sick. I sense it through the distance. He who resides in my memory only as a picture, I now experience in the depth of his bodily life." By the time Buber wrote Brother Body, Nijinsky has indeed fallen ill. The Copernican turn, which led to his diagnosis with schizophrenia and finally to his hospitalization in 1919, occurred in late 1913. I find it interesting that Buber reconnects with the trope of dance against the background of the great dancer's mental illness, as though the latter reinforces the dancer's body with the power of truth. That is to say, not merely with joy, as in the Hellenic dance, but also with suffering. In fact, with the entire phenomenology of human agony, with which Buber deeply identifies. I feel his illness. For a decisive moment, I feel an angry impulse rush from the spinal marrow to the resisting muscles, and in this same moment, the mystery of the dancer overpowers me. I live the ineffable unfolding of the moment, of the movement. Could it be that the ailing dancer evoked the thought of the sick world? After all, World War I is raging outside. Or the sick Jew, as in Pinsker's ghost-like apparition of a living corpse? Or of his own wife Paula, who was badly ill with typhus that year? And thus, could it be that the concern for Nijinsky's well-being is in fact a concern for the future of dance, namely for hope of change? However, Nijinsky's illness is the catalyst for an in-depth investigation into the nature and origin of dance that goes far beyond its role as a metaphorical trope, and also beyond the simple notion of social couple dancing or a circle folk dance. To start with, Buber delves into the origins of dance, bringing to mind Paul Valéry's 1936 Philosophie de la danse. He contends that rather than being a mimetic form of art, dance is primarily a playful exaltation of the possible. These are his words. In Buber's words, the body's enjoyment of itself and its spirituality. And I quote again, "In all other movements of man, the gesture is determined by the sensation to which it responds, or by the end towards which it strives. In play, come dance. The body is autonomous. It has no intent or goal outside itself." This notion of dance as exuberant surplus serves as prolegomena to a wider understanding of dance in terms of the entire field of human gesture, within the greater phenomenon of language at large. Needless to say, this thought, articulated in 1914, calls up Walter Benjamin's interest in the difference between the language of man and language as such. Yet, what does Buber mean by gesture? What does it express? How does the gesture of man liberate itself in Nijinsky's dance? It is neither play nor expression, Buber explains, but what bound them both and gave them law, magic. Magic, so it seems, is both the source and the outcome of Nijinsky's wrestling with the language of dance, a struggle which reveals the very law and shape of time itself. I quote, "In this dancer, the deep origin returns, movement as gestalt, magically formed time." The term gestalt stands for the organic, malleable, extensive nature of form, as opposed to its fixed Platonic idea. It is thus that gestalt represents the vital feature of plasticity, a quality so badly sought after by every contemporary artist, let alone in the field of dance. Whereas classical ballet, as well as other highly codified dance forms, rely upon set formal rules, the gestalt of gesture diverges from any such set movements. It is something that happens in between. Gesture is the exhibition of a mediality. It is the process of making a means visible as such, says Giorgio Agamben, and hence, in Buber's words, a totality. Uninterpretable, untranslatable, unique and unrelated, yet expressive. But the truth that is expressive cannot be stated, only experienced. It is thus that the symbol expresses.
We have 3 minutes left.
Instead of the word symbol, let us listen here to Buber's expression Sinnbild, by which gesture is charged with sense. Sinn, to be understood as feeling, understanding, giving thought and significance to something, and furthermore as an image of purpose and inherent value. It is Agamben's ethical perception of gesture as a pure medium that confirms, almost 100 years later, the relevance of Buber's insight. Agamben's ethical view of gesture as communicating communicability as such suggests an authentic opening up towards the other, towards otherness, towards a dialogical relationship between dancer and beholder, as described in Buber's essay. I will now skip Gabriele Brandstätter's words about that and Lucia Ruprecht's understanding of Nijinsky's dance as exemplifying exactly that. And I will conclude. If at the beginning of his way, Buber questioned dance as an aesthetic figure of otherness, a symbol of beauty, vitality, spontaneity, and freedom, then overcoming otherness has now become an ethical paradigm, a Sinnbild of interpersonal dialogue in a pure, ancient, non-verbal, gestural language. It is in this sense, I feel, that Nijinsky's Geist and Jest have taken Buber one step closer to I and Thou. And surprisingly, another step was yet to follow. As it turns out, Buber's poetical thought returned to the paradigm of dance at the age of 73 in Rome on the 29th of March 1951. Greater is dance step than a step, but the way is greater than the dances. For as it comes to an end, it is as if it began. Go, brave man, as far as your own limit, and behold, it breaks open. No sooner, but then, behold. Thank you very much.